I was scrolling through TikTok during my lunch break at Sunshine Animal Hospital when my entire world collapsed in 30 seconds. The video started innocently enough, just another travel influencer showing off a romantic getaway. But as the camera panned across the familiar limestone cliffs and crystal-clear waters of Hamilton Pool, my heart stopped. There was my husband, David, his arm wrapped around a stunning brunette who definitely wasn't me, both of them laughing as they jumped into the same swimming hole where we'd had our first anniversary photo taken 5 years ago. The caption read, "Surprise weekend with my man at this hidden Texas gem," and the location tag confirmed my worst nightmare. Hamilton Pool Preserve, the exact spot David and I had discovered together during our early dating days. The same place where he'd proposed 3 years later. The same place I'd been secretly planning to take him next weekend for our upcoming 8th wedding anniversary, thinking it would be a beautiful way to reconnect after what I'd assumed was just a rough patch in our marriage. But here he was, very clearly not working late at the office as he'd claimed this past weekend. Instead, recreating our most sacred memories with someone else. The woman in the video looked young, probably mid-20s, with the kind of effortless beauty that made my 32-year-old self suddenly feel ancient. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Her laugh was musical, carefree, everything I hadn't been lately with the kids' schedules, work stress, and David's increasing distance. My hands trembled as I watched the video again, hoping desperately that I was somehow mistaken, that it was just someone who looked like my husband. But there was no denying those broad shoulders, that distinctive scar on his left arm from a childhood accident, or the way he ran his fingers through his hair when he was nervous or excited. The timestamp showed this past Saturday afternoon, the exact time David had texted me saying he was stuck in back-to-back client meetings and wouldn't be home until late. The veterinary clinic's break room suddenly felt suffocating, the familiar smell of disinfectant and the distant sound of barking dogs fading into background noise as my mind raced. 8 years of marriage, 2 children, a mortgage, shared dreams of expanding our family, all of it crashing down because of a random TikTok video that had appeared on my For You page like some cruel twist of algorithmic fate. I screenshot the video with shaking fingers, my veterinary technician training kicking in with the same methodical documentation I used for patient records. Evidence first, emotional breakdown later. The profile belonged to someone named Nicole Brady, and a quick scroll through her other videos revealed a lifestyle I could barely comprehend. Designer clothes, expensive restaurants, luxury travel, all funded by what appeared to be a combination of sponsored content and mysterious boyfriend references that never showed a face until now. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd been supporting our family's modest but comfortable life while apparently funding David's secret relationship with an influencer whose idea of work was creating 30-second videos about skincare routines and aesthetic coffee shops. Every overtime shift I'd picked up, every grocery budget I'd carefully managed, every family vacation I'd postponed because we needed to save money, all of it potentially subsidizing this elaborate deception. My phone buzzed with a text from David, the notification appearing over Nicole's perfectly curated Instagram-worthy face like a sick joke. "Running late again tonight. Don't wait up. Love you." The casual lie, delivered with the same 3-word sign-off he'd been using for years, felt like a physical slap. How many of these late nights had actually been spent with her? How many times had I fallen asleep alone, convincing myself that his demanding job was just a temporary sacrifice for our family's future? The worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself, though that cut deep enough. It was the calculated nature of it all, the way he'd used our most meaningful place as the backdrop for his affair. Hamilton Pool wasn't just some random scenic spot we'd visited once or twice. It was where David had told me he loved me for the first time, where we'd brought the kids for countless weekend adventures, where Emma had taken her first tentative steps into the shallow water, while Jake collected smooth river rocks in an old coffee can. I thought about all the times over the past 6 months when David had seemed distracted, distant, claiming the stress of his marketing job was overwhelming, how he'd started working out more frequently, buying new clothes, paying more attention to his appearance. I'd actually encouraged it, thinking he was going through some kind of positive self-improvement phase. I'd even complimented him on how good he looked, never imagining that his renewed attention to fitness and fashion was motivated by impressing someone else. The signs had been there, obvious in retrospect, but I'd been too trusting, too focused on managing our household and career to connect the dots. The mysterious phone calls he'd step outside to take, claiming they were work-related. The new cologne that appeared in our bathroom without explanation. The way he'd become protective of his phone, taking it with him everywhere, even to the shower. The gradual decrease in physical intimacy that I'd attributed to exhaustion from parenting and work stress. Dr. Santos appeared in the break room doorway, her kind face creased with concern. As the clinic director, she'd become something of a mentor to me over the past 3 years, and her maternal instincts seemed to activate whenever any of her staff appeared distressed. She took one look at my pale face and closed the door behind her, settling into the chair across from me with the patient attention she typically reserved for anxious pet owners. "Sarah, honey, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Her voice carried the slight accent that revealed her Puerto Rican heritage and the warmth that made her beloved by both staff and clients. I'd confided in Dr. Santos before about my dreams of eventually going back to school for my veterinary degree, and she'd been incredibly supportive, even offering to adjust my schedule to accommodate classes when I was ready. I handed her my phone without a word, watching her expression change as she processed what she was seeing. Dr. Santos had met David numerous times at clinic events and holiday parties, had complimented me on what a loving husband and father he appeared to be. Seeing her face shift from confusion to anger to protective concern somehow made the situation feel more real, more final. "Oh, mija," she whispered, using the endearment she reserved for moments of particular tenderness or distress. "How did you find this?" I explained about the random TikTok appearance, how the algorithm had somehow delivered this devastating revelation during what should have been an ordinary lunch break. She listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions about timing and details. "You need to go home," she said firmly after I'd finished explaining. "Take the rest of the day. Take tomorrow if you need it. Tom can cover your afternoon appointments and I'll handle anything urgent." Her immediate offer of support, no questions asked about productivity or client schedules, reminded me why I loved working at this clinic. Unlike David's corporate environment where everything was metrics and performance indicators, Dr. Santos understood that life sometimes required flexibility. But going home felt impossible. The house where David and I had built our life together, where Emma and Jake would return from school expecting normalcy, where I'd have to pretend everything was fine until I figured out what to do with this information. The thought of sitting in our living room, surrounded by family photos and shared memories, waiting for David to come home with another lie about his whereabouts, made my stomach turn. "I don't know how to face the kids," I admitted, voicing the fear that was almost as overwhelming as the betrayal itself. Emma and Jake adored their father, looked forward to his weekend adventures and bedtime stories. How could I maintain their sense of security while processing this earth-shattering discovery? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. How could I look at their innocent faces and not reveal that their family was potentially falling apart? Dr. Santos reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her grip steady and reassuring. "You don't have to figure everything out today. Right now, you just need to get through the next few hours. The kids don't need to know anything until you've had time to process and make some decisions. Children are resilient, Sarah, but they need stability more than they need complete honesty about adult problems." Her practical wisdom helped ground me. reminding me that this crisis, as devastating as it felt, was still manageable with the right approach. I'd handled emergency surgeries, difficult pet owners, and complicated medical cases with calm professionalism. Surely I could apply some of that same methodical thinking to my personal life, even if the stakes felt impossibly higher. I spent the drive home alternating between numbness and rage, my mind spinning through possible explanations that might somehow make this less catastrophic. Maybe Nicole was just a friend, and the video was misleading. Maybe there was some work connection I didn't know about. Maybe David was planning some elaborate surprise that required secrecy. But each rationalization felt more desperate than the last, and the evidence was too clear to deny. Our house in Cedar Park looked exactly the same as when I'd left for work. That morning, the familiar sight of Emma's bike in the driveway and Jake's soccer ball abandoned on the front lawn, providing a false sense of normalcy. Inside, everything was perfectly ordinary. David's coffee mug from the morning still sat in the sink. His work jacket hung on the back of the kitchen chair where he always left it. The mundane details of our shared life continued unchanged, oblivious to the fact that everything had fundamentally shifted. I found myself moving through the house like a detective, seeing familiar objects with new eyes. The family vacation photos on the mantle, including several from our last anniversary trip to San Antonio, now felt like props in an elaborate performance. Our wedding portrait, hanging proudly in the hallway, seemed to mock me with its frozen moment of happiness and hope. Even the grocery list stuck to the refrigerator, written in David's handwriting, felt like evidence of his double life. The afternoon passed in a strange haze of automatic parenting activities. I picked up Jake from elementary school, listened to Emma complain about her algebra teacher, helped with homework, started dinner preparations. The familiar rhythms of maternal responsibility provided a welcome distraction from the chaos in my mind. But underneath the surface, I felt like I was performing the role of Sarah Mitchell, wife and mother, rather than actually being her. Jake noticed my distraction first, his 10-year-old intuition picking up on subtle changes in my demeanor that I thought I'd successfully hidden. "Mom, are you sick? You seem weird today." His innocent question almost broke my carefully maintained composure, reminding me how perceptive children could be about adult emotions, even when we thought we were protecting them. "Just tired, sweetheart," I managed, ruffling his hair in a gesture that felt both genuine and performed. Sometimes grown-ups have long days at work. The half-truth felt like a betrayal of his trust, but the alternative, explaining that his father was potentially having an affair, was unthinkable. Jake accepted my explanation with the easy faith of childhood, but I caught Emma watching me, with more skeptical eyes. At 14, Emma had developed the keen observational skills that came with adolescence, along with an emerging understanding of adult relationships that made her harder to fool. She didn't question my explanation directly, but I noticed her glancing at me throughout dinner preparation, clearly sensing that something was off in our household's usual atmosphere. David arrived home at his usual time, around 7:30, calling out his standard greeting as he hung up his jacket and loosened his tie. "Hey family, sorry I'm late. Crazy day at the office." The practiced casualness of his entrance, so normal and familiar, felt surreal given what I now knew about his weekend activities. He kissed my cheek with the same perfunctory affection he'd shown for months, asked about everyone's day with apparent genuine interest, and settled into his usual dinner routine without betraying any hint of guilt or deception. Watching him interact normally with Emma and Jake, listening to him help with homework and discuss weekend plans, created a cognitive dissonance so intense it was almost physically painful. This was the same man who'd spent Saturday afternoon creating romantic memories with another woman at our special place. The same father who'd taught Jake to skip stones at Hamilton Pool was now asking about his son's upcoming school project with seemingly authentic parental concern. Part of me wanted to confront him immediately, to demand explanations and force the truth into the open. But a larger part recognized that I needed more information, a clearer understanding of the situation before I detonated our family's stability. Emma and Jake deserved better than to witness their parents' marriage implode without warning during a random Tuesday evening dinner. After the kids were settled with their evening activities, David and I fell into our usual routine of cleaning, up and preparing for the next day. The domesticity of loading the dishwasher and reviewing school schedules felt increasingly bizarre as I watched him perform these husbandly duties while keeping such massive secrets. Every casual comment about his day, every mention of work stress or client demands felt like another layer of deception. "I might be late again tomorrow," he mentioned while folding laundry, his tone carefully neutral. "We've got this big presentation coming up, and the client is being really demanding about revisions." The lie came so easily, delivered with just the right amount of frustrated professionalism, that I wondered how many similar deceptions I'd accepted without question over the past months. Instead of my usual supportive response, I found myself asking more specific questions. Which client? What kind of presentation? Who else was involved in the project? David answered smoothly, providing details that sounded plausible but could have been completely fabricated. His ability to lie so convincingly, to maintain eye contact while spinning false narratives about his whereabouts, revealed a side of my husband I'd never seen before. That night, as David slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling and replaying every suspicious moment from recent months. The pattern was unmistakable once I stopped making excuses for it. The increased attention to his appearance, the mysterious schedule changes, the emotional distance that I'd attributed to work stress, all of it formed a clear picture of a man living a double life. I thought about Nicole's TikTok profile, the lifestyle of luxury and leisure that seemed incompatible with David's claimed financial constraints. How many times had he told me we couldn't afford family vacations or home improvements while apparently funding weekend getaways with his girlfriend? How many times had I adjusted our budget or picked up extra shifts to accommodate his claims of work pressure while he was actually investing time and money in another relationship? The financial implications were almost as devastating as the emotional betrayal. We'd been saving for years to potentially expand our family or help fund my return to school for veterinary training. Every dollar I'd contributed to our joint savings account might have been indirectly supporting his affair. Every sacrifice I'd made for our supposed shared future had been built on a foundation of lies. As dawn approached, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and liberating. I wasn't going to confront David immediately, but I wasn't going to continue accepting his deceptions either. I was going to gather information, understand the full scope of his betrayal, and make informed decisions about our family's future. For the first time in months, I felt like I had some measure of control over my circumstances, even if that control came at the cost of my faith in everything I'd thought I knew about my marriage. The woman who'd fallen asleep, heartbroken and confused, was already beginning to transform into someone stronger, someone who wouldn't be satisfied with convenient lies or partial truths. Nicole Brady's TikTok video had accidentally revealed more than just David's affair. It had shown me that I'd been living in a carefully constructed illusion, and now that the facade was cracking, I intended to see exactly what lay underneath. The next morning arrived with the cruel normalcy of any other Wednesday. David's alarm buzzed at 6:15. He showered with his usual efficiency, kissed my forehead goodbye, and left for work with his travel mug of coffee and his laptop bag slung over his shoulder. The mundane routine felt like watching a stranger perform an elaborate pantomime of my husband's life. Emma shuffled into the kitchen, still half asleep, her long brown hair tangled from sleep, wearing the oversized Austin FC t-shirt she'd claimed as pajamas months ago. At 14, she possessed an uncanny ability to sense emotional undercurrents in our household, a skill that had sharpened considerably since she'd entered high school and begun navigating her own complicated social dynamics. "You look terrible, Mom," she observed with the brutal honesty that only teenagers could deliver while pouring cereal into a bowl. "Did you sleep at all last night?" Her genuine concern, mixed with the casual bluntness of adolescence, reminded me how much I'd been relying on her maturity lately. Emma had taken on responsibilities beyond her years, helping with Jake's homework when I worked late shifts, managing her own school schedule with minimal supervision, even contributing to household chores without being asked. I deflected her question with practiced maternal efficiency, bustling around the kitchen to pack lunches and gather school supplies while avoiding direct eye contact. But Emma's perceptive gaze followed my movements, clearly cataloging the subtle signs of distress I thought I'd successfully hidden. Her father's daughter in so many ways, she possessed his analytical nature, but paired it with an emotional intelligence David often seemed to lack. Jake bounded downstairs with his typical 10-year-old energy, his curly hair sticking up at impossible angles despite my efforts to tame it the night before. Unlike his sister, he accepted my tired appearance without question, too focused on his excitement about the day's activities to notice maternal undercurrents. His innocent chatter about recess plans and upcoming spelling tests provided a welcome distraction from the turmoil in my mind. Dad said he might take us to Topgolf this weekend if his work stuff calms down, Jake announced between bites of toast, unknowingly twisting the knife of David's deception deeper. He promised we could try the fancy simulator bays this time. The casual mention of future plans, delivered with such genuine enthusiasm, made my chest tighten with protective fury. How dare David make promises to our children while conducting secret relationships behind our backs? Emma's eyes met mine across the kitchen table, and I saw a flicker of something that looked suspiciously like understanding. Not full knowledge, but an intuitive sense that something significant was shifting in our family dynamics. Her emotional radar had been finely tuned by years of navigating divorced friends' households and absorbing the relationship drama that permeated teenage social circles. The school drop-off routine provided temporary relief from the intensity of maintaining normalcy at home. Jake's elementary school buzzed with the chaotic energy of children and harried parents rushing through morning routines. The familiar sight of other families managing their daily logistics offered a strange comfort, a reminder that life continued its predictable patterns regardless of personal crises. But watching other couples coordinate schedules and share parenting responsibilities created an uncomfortable contrast to my new reality. Were any of these seemingly stable marriages hiding similar deceptions? How many of these women had discovered their husbands' affairs through social media algorithms? The paranoid thoughts felt foreign to my usually trusting nature, but Nicole's TikTok had fundamentally altered my perception of relationship security. Emma's high school presented a different atmosphere entirely. Westfield High carried the typical teenage drama and academic pressure that made my problems feel both immense and insignificant simultaneously. Watching Emma join her friends near the main entrance, laughing at some shared joke while shouldering her heavily loaded backpack, reminded me of my primary responsibility. Whatever happened between David and me, these children needed stability and protection from adult chaos. The drive to Sunshine Animal Hospital usually calmed my nerves, but today the familiar route felt like navigating through emotional quicksand. Every song on the radio seemed designed to mock my situation. Every billboard advertising happy families or romantic getaways felt like personal attacks. I turned off the music and drove in silence, trying to organize my thoughts into some semblance of rational planning. Dr. Santos was waiting in the parking lot when I arrived, her early presence clearly intentional rather than coincidental. Her warm brown eyes conveyed the kind of maternal concern that had made her legendary among both staff and clients. At 50, she possessed the rare combination of professional expertise and emotional wisdom that came from managing both challenging veterinary cases and complicated human relationships. "How are you holding up, Mija?" she asked gently, falling into step beside me as we entered the clinic together. The question carried layers of meaning beyond simple courtesy. Dr. Santos understood the particular challenges of balancing demanding work with family responsibilities, having raised 3 children while building her veterinary practice from nothing. "I feel like I'm living in someone else's life," I admitted, grateful for her non-judgmental presence. "Everything looks the same, but nothing feels real anymore." The confession emerged more easily than expected, perhaps because Dr. Santos occupied a unique space in my life, professional yet personal, supportive without being invasive. She nodded with the understanding of someone who'd witnessed countless personal crises among her staff over the years. Betrayal has a way of making us question everything we thought we knew about our lives. The ground shifts under our feet, and suddenly we're not sure what's solid anymore. Her words captured exactly the disorientation I'd been struggling to articulate. The morning's appointments provided blessed distraction from my personal turmoil. A golden retriever with a suspicious lump that turned out to be benign, a nervous cat requiring vaccinations, an elderly beagle with arthritis whose owner needed reassurance about pain management options. The familiar rhythm of animal care, the straightforward nature of veterinary problems with clear solutions, offered refuge from the emotional complexity of my marriage crisis. But even routine procedures carried unwelcome reminders of my situation. A young couple bringing in their new puppy for initial vaccines radiated the kind of unified excitement and shared purpose that I'd once felt with David. Their easy communication, the way they finished each other's sentences while discussing pet care plans, highlighted the emotional distance that had grown between my husband and me long before I discovered his affair. Tom Phillips, my longtime colleague and the clinic's head veterinary technician, noticed my distraction during our mid-morning break. At 38, Tom possessed the steady competence and gentle humor that made him invaluable in high-stress situations. His own divorce 3 years earlier had been amicable but emotionally draining, giving him insight into the particular challenges of maintaining professional performance during personal upheaval. "You seem off today," he observed, while restocking supplies in the treatment room. "Everything okay at home?" His question carried genuine concern without prying curiosity, the mark of someone who understood boundaries while offering support. Tom had become something of a big brother figure to me over the years, providing perspective and stability during various family stresses. I hesitated, uncertain how much to share. The affair discovery felt too raw, too potentially humiliating to discuss openly. But the isolation of keeping such a massive secret was already becoming unbearable. "David and I are going through some difficulties," I finally admitted, choosing careful words that acknowledged problems without revealing specifics. Tom's expression shifted to one of gentle understanding. "Marriage is tough, especially with kids and work pressure. Sometimes couples just lose their way for a while." His diplomatic response offered comfort without demanding details, creating space for me to share more if I chose, while respecting my privacy if I didn't. But his assumption that our problems were typical marital difficulties, the kind that could be resolved through communication and effort, felt almost naive given what I'd discovered. How could I explain that my husband wasn't just distant or stressed, but actively living a double life with another woman? How could I convey the difference between marriage problems and marriage fraud? The lunch break found me back in the staff room, staring at my phone with morbid fascination. Nicole Brady's TikTok profile had become an obsession, each video offering clues about her relationship with David while simultaneously torturing me with evidence of their intimacy. Her content painted a picture of someone living a charmed life, traveling to beautiful locations, wearing expensive clothes, dining at restaurants I recognized as far beyond our family budget. One video from 3 weeks ago showed her getting a pedicure at an upscale spa in downtown Austin, her freshly manicured nails featuring an intricate design that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The casual luxury of her lifestyle raised uncomfortable questions about funding sources. Was David using our family's resources to support her expensive tastes? Had our careful budgeting and financial sacrifices been subsidizing his girlfriend's influencer lifestyle? Another video, posted just 5 days ago, showed her making breakfast in what appeared to be a high-end apartment kitchen. The granite, countertops, stainless steel appliances, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lady Bird Lake suggested rent far exceeding what someone with her apparent employment status should afford. The space was decorated with the kind of tasteful artwork and designer furniture that spoke of serious financial investment. But it was the coffee mug visible in the background that nearly made me drop my phone. A distinctive blue ceramic piece with "World's Best Dad" printed in Jake's elementary school handwriting, a Father's Day gift from 2 years ago that I'd helped him make in art class. The mug that supposedly lived in David's office desk drawer, brought home occasionally when he worked late, was apparently also furnishing his girlfriend's apartment. The violation of seeing our son's handmade gift in another woman's space felt more intimate and painful than any physical evidence of their relationship. This wasn't just an affair. It was an invasion of our family's most personal spaces and memories. David wasn't compartmentalizing his two lives as cleanly as I'd assumed. He was blending them, allowing Nicole access to pieces of our children's world without their knowledge or consent. My hands shook as I screenshot the video, adding it to the growing collection of evidence I was instinctively gathering. The documentation felt necessary, even though I hadn't yet decided what to do with the information. Some part of me, perhaps, the veterinary technician trained in careful record-keeping, insisted on preserving proof of what I was discovering. Dr. Santos appeared in the doorway again, her timing suggesting she'd been monitoring my emotional state throughout the day. You look like you've seen something disturbing," she observed, settling into the chair across from me with the patient attention she reserved for serious conversations. "Do you want to talk about it?" This time, the words came tumbling out before I could stop them. The TikTok discovery, the Hamilton pool location, Nicole's lifestyle, the coffee mug that shouldn't exist in her apartment. Dr. Santos listened without interruption, her expression growing more concerned as the full scope of David's deception became clear. "Mija, this is serious," she said finally, her voice carrying the gravity of someone who understood the implications. "This isn't just an affair. This level of deception, the financial components, the involvement of your children's belongings, this suggests something much more calculated and long-term." Her professional assessment confirmed what I'd been afraid to fully acknowledge. The afternoon passed in a haze of automatic responses and mechanical tasks. I performed my job competently, but felt disconnected from everything around me, as if watching my life unfold from a distance. The weight of keeping such an enormous secret while maintaining normal interactions with colleagues and clients created an exhausting cognitive dissonance. When 3 o'clock arrived, signaling time for school pickup, I felt wholly unprepared to resume my maternal role. How could I look at Emma and Jake, knowing their father was systematically betraying our family? How could I continue pretending everything was normal when their handmade gifts were decorating his mistress's apartment? Jake's elementary school pickup line moved with its usual slow efficiency, giving me time to compose my expression into something resembling maternal normalcy. Through the windshield, I watched other parents chatting casually. Their conversations likely focused on normal concerns like homework schedules and weekend activities. The ordinary nature of their interactions highlighted how isolated I'd become in the space of 24 hours. Jake emerged from the building with his typical exuberant energy, his backpack bouncing as he ran toward the car. His innocent excitement about his day, his eager chatter about playground adventures and classroom projects, created a protective bubble around my heart. Whatever complicated adult decisions lay ahead, this child's joy and security remained my primary responsibility. "Guess what, Mom? Mrs. Henderson said our volcano project was the best in the class." His pride was infectious, temporarily lifting my spirits despite everything else. "She wants to enter it in the district science fair. Can we tell Dad when he gets home?" The innocent question, delivered with such genuine enthusiasm, reminded me of how many family moments David was potentially missing while pursuing his secret relationship. Emma's pickup at the high school presented different challenges. Her adolescent intuition picked up immediately on subtle changes in my demeanor. her perceptive gaze cataloging signs of distress that I thought I'd successfully hidden. Unlike her younger brother. She didn't chatter about her day, but instead watched me with quiet concern. "Mom, what's really wrong?" she asked as we stopped at a red light near our neighborhood. Her direct question, delivered with mature concern beyond her 14 years, caught me off guard. Emma had always been emotionally intelligent, but her ability to read adult situations had sharpened considerably in recent months. "Just work stress, sweetheart," I replied, the lie feeling heavy on my tongue. "Some challenging cases at the clinic today." The deflection was partially true but felt like a betrayal of her trust. Emma deserved honesty from the adults in her life, but the truth about her father's betrayal seemed too devastating to share without more preparation. She studied my profile with the skeptical attention of someone who'd heard similar explanations before. "You've been acting weird since yesterday, and Dad's been working late more often lately. Are you guys having problems?" Her question demonstrated a perceptiveness that was both impressive and heartbreaking. 14-year-olds shouldn't need to monitor their parents' relationship stability. The temptation to confide in her was overwhelming. Emma's maturity and insight made her feel like a potential ally in navigating this crisis. But she was still my child, still deserving of protection from adult problems that could destabilize her sense of security. "Every marriage goes through challenging periods," I said carefully. "But your dad and I both love you and Jake very much. That never changes." Her expression suggested she wasn't entirely satisfied with my response, but she didn't push further. Instead, she reached across the center console and squeezed my hand, a gesture of support that nearly brought tears to my eyes. "You know you can tell me things, right? I'm not a little kid anymore." The remainder of the drive passed in comfortable silence, Emma's quiet presence providing unexpected comfort. Her offer of support, delivered with teenage awkwardness but genuine care, reminded me that I wasn't entirely alone in this crisis. While I couldn't burden her with adult problems, her emotional intelligence and loyalty represented resources I hadn't fully appreciated before. At home, the familiar chaos of after-school routines provided welcome distraction from my internal turmoil. Homework supervision, snack preparation, and activity coordination demanded full attention, leaving little mental space for obsessing over David's deception. The normalcy of maternal responsibilities anchored me to what remained solid and real in my life. But even routine tasks carried unwelcome reminders of my new reality. Jake's math worksheet included word problems about splitting resources equally, unconsciously echoing my growing concerns about asset division. Emma's history assignment about propaganda and public manipulation seemed to comment on my husband's ability to present false narratives convincingly. As evening approached, I found myself dreading David's return home. The prospect of maintaining normal conversation while knowing about his double life felt overwhelming. How many lies would he tell tonight? How many false explanations about his schedule would I have to pretend to believe? The thought of performing the role of trusting wife while gathering evidence of his betrayal created an almost unbearable internal tension. Saga Part 3, Truth-Seeking Phase. David's key turned in the front door at exactly 7:45, 15 minutes later than his usual arrival time. I registered this detail automatically, my mind now cataloging every deviation from normal patterns as potential evidence of deception. The casual way he called out his evening greeting, the practiced ease with which he hung up his jacket and loosened his tie, felt like watching a performance I'd seen countless times without recognizing it as theater. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic on I-35 was absolutely brutal," he announced while washing his hands at the kitchen sink. The explanation sounded perfectly reasonable, the kind of minor delay that happened regularly in Austin's congested transportation system. But now I found myself noting the specific details, wondering if they could be verified, questioning whether traffic was covering for time spent with Nicole. Emma looked up from her homework spread across the dining room table, her perceptive gaze moving between her father and me as if sensing undercurrents she couldn't quite identify. "How was your big presentation today?" she asked with the polite interest teenagers sometimes showed in parental work activities. Her question was innocent, but it reminded me that I'd been tracking David's claimed schedule more carefully since yesterday. "Actually got postponed until Friday," he replied smoothly, opening the refrigerator to grab a beer. "Client needed more time to review the preliminary materials. You know how it is with these corporate types, always wanting to micromanage every detail." The explanation flowed naturally, delivered with just the right amount of professional frustration to sound authentic. But I remembered him mentioning this presentation as the reason for his anticipated late night tonight. If it had been postponed, why hadn't he come home earlier? The discrepancy was small, potentially meaningless, but it joined the growing collection of inconsistencies I was beginning to notice in his daily narratives. Jake bounded into the kitchen with his typical evening energy, eager to share his volcano project success with his father. Watching David's face light up with apparent genuine pride as our son described his science fair selection created a cognitive dissonance so intense it was almost physically painful. This was the same man who'd made intimate memories with another woman using our family's sacred places. How could he compartmentalize so effectively? "That's fantastic, buddy. We'll have to celebrate this weekend. Maybe take the whole family somewhere special." David's enthusiasm seemed authentic, his engagement with Jake's excitement appearing completely genuine. The ease with which he shifted between deceptive husband and loving father revealed a level of emotional compartmentalization that I found deeply disturbing. During dinner, I found myself studying David's behavior with new attention to detail. The way he checked his phone periodically, claiming to monitor work emails but angling the screen away from family view. The subtle change in his expression. When notifications arrived, a micro-expression of either disappointment or anticipation that I'd never noticed before. The careful way he steered conversations away from specific details about his daily activities. "How's that new client project coming along?" I asked casually, testing whether he'd maintain consistency with his earlier explanation. "The one that's been keeping you so busy lately." My question was designed to sound like routine spousal interest, while actually probing for information about his cover stories. David's response was immediate and detailed, perhaps too detailed. He launched into an elaborate explanation about client demands, revision cycles, and team coordination challenges that sounded professionally plausible but felt somehow rehearsed. His ability to construct such convincing narratives on the spot was both impressive and terrifying. "Sounds stressful," I replied neutrally, filing away the specific details he'd provided to check for consistency later. "No wonder you've been working such long hours lately." The sympathetic tone felt foreign, on my tongue, but maintaining normalcy required playing the role of supportive wife while secretly gathering information. After dinner, while David helped Jake with homework and Emma disappeared into her room to video chat with friends, I found myself alone with the dinner dishes and my racing thoughts. The familiar domestic task of cleaning up provided physical activity while my mind processed the day's discoveries and planned next steps. The coffee mug revelation had been haunting me all afternoon. Jake's handmade Father's Day gift wasn't just missing from David's office, it was actively being used in another woman's home. The violation felt more personal than physical infidelity, representing a contamination of our children's innocent expressions of love for their father. I dried my hands and quietly made my way to David's home office, a converted bedroom that served as his workspace for evening tasks and weekend projects. The room reflected his personality perfectly. Organized, efficient, minimally decorated except for family photos and the children's artwork that had accumulated over the years. The space where he claimed to work late on client projects while actually conducting his affair. His desk drawer, where he supposedly kept personal items including Jake's mug, opened easily. Inside, I found the usual collection of office supplies, charging cables, and business cards. But no blue ceramic coffee mug with childish handwriting declaring him the world's best dad. The absence confirmed what Nicole's TikTok had revealed, but seeing the empty space where it should have been felt like discovering a crime scene. Other items seemed to be missing as well, though I couldn't be entirely certain. A small picture frame that had held a family photo from last Christmas, a paperweight Emma had given him for his birthday, a stress ball from his company that he'd often fidgeted with during phone calls. Small personal objects that wouldn't be missed immediately, but whose absence suggested a systematic removal of family-related items. Was David gradually moving pieces of his life to Nicole's apartment? How long had this process been ongoing? The thought of our family's personal belongings slowly migrating to furnish his secret relationship felt like watching our marriage dissolve in slow motion. Find what you were looking for? David's voice from the doorway made me jump, my heart racing with the guilty panic of being caught investigating. He stood in the entrance casually, but his eyes were alert, studying my position near his desk with uncomfortable intensity. Just looking for a pen, I improvised quickly, grateful that the desk drawer was still partially open and contained visible writing supplies. Wanted to make a grocery list for tomorrow. The lie came more easily than expected, perhaps because living with a skilled deceiver was teaching me the mechanics of casual dishonesty. His expression relaxed slightly, but something in his gaze remained watchful. "There's a whole cup of pens on the kitchen counter," he pointed out reasonably, "right next to where you usually make your lists." The observation was accurate and made my explanation seem unnecessarily complicated. "You're right, wasn't thinking clearly. Long day at the clinic," I replied, closing the drawer and moving away from his desk with what I hoped appeared to be casual embarrassment. Dr. Santos had me working on some challenging cases today. The deflection incorporated enough truth to sound convincing while avoiding the real reason for my distraction. David stepped aside to let me pass, but I felt his attention following me as I left the office. The encounter had been brief and seemingly innocent, but it marked a shift in our dynamic. He was now aware that I was paying closer attention to his spaces and belongings. The investigation phase of my truth-seeking would need to become more careful and strategic. Back in the kitchen, I did actually write a grocery list, partly to validate my cover story and partly because the familiar task helped calm my nerves. But my mind wasn't focused on meal planning. Instead, I was developing a mental catalog of questions that needed answers. How long had the affair been ongoing? How serious was David's relationship with Nicole? Were there financial implications beyond what I'd already discovered? The children's bedtime routine provided temporary distraction from these concerns. Jake's bath time and story reading, Emma's negotiation for extended phone privileges, the familiar chaos of getting two children settled for sleep. These parental responsibilities felt solid and real in ways that my marriage increasingly didn't. But even bedtime stories carried unwelcome reminders of my situation. Jake's favorite book that week was about a family of bears dealing with trust and honesty, themes that felt particularly relevant to our household dynamics. As I read about Papa Bear learning to tell the truth after a series of well-intentioned deceptions, I wondered what lessons my son was unconsciously absorbing about adult relationships. Emma's goodnight hug lasted longer than usual, her 14-year-old intuition picking up on emotional undercurrents she couldn't fully identify. "Mom, are you sure everything's okay?" she whispered as I tucked her covers around her shoulders. "You seem different lately, sad or worried about something." Her perceptiveness was both touching and concerning. How much should adolescents have to worry about their parents' emotional stability? "Sometimes adults go through challenging periods," I replied carefully. "But you don't need to worry about taking care of me. That's not your job." The reassurance felt important, even if I couldn't provide complete honesty about the source of my distress. "I know, but I care about you," she said simply. "And if something was really wrong, you'd tell me, right? I mean, I'm old enough to..." handle important stuff. Her offer of support was genuine and mature, but also highlighted the impossible position I was in. She deserved honesty from the adults in her life, but the truth about her father could destabilize her sense of security in ways that seemed cruel. After both children were settled, David and I found ourselves alone in the living room for the first time since my discovery. The space felt charged with unspoken tension, at least from my perspective. David appeared relaxed, scrolling through his phone while half-watching a nature documentary, seemingly unaware that his wife was conducting a secret investigation into his fidelity. "How was your day, really?" he asked during a commercial break, glancing up from his phone with what appeared to be genuine interest. "You seemed distracted when I got home." His observation was accurate and delivered with enough concern to sound like normal spousal attention. The irony of him noticing my distraction while remaining oblivious to its cause was almost amusing. "Just some challenging cases at work," I replied, sticking close enough to the truth to avoid outright fabrication. "Dr. Santos had me handling some complicated situations today." The explanation was technically accurate, even if the most challenging situation involved my marriage rather than veterinary medicine. "Anything you want to talk about?" He pressed gently, setting down his phone and giving me his full attention. The gesture was considerate and felt genuine, which made his deception even more disturbing. How could someone show such apparent care and concern while systematically lying about fundamental aspects of their life? The temptation to confront him directly was overwhelming. Part of me wanted to demand explanations, to force honesty about Nicole and Hamilton Pool and the missing coffee mug, but a larger part recognized that I needed more information before making accusations that could fundamentally alter our family's stability. "Nothing that won't work itself out," I replied carefully. "Just need some time to process everything." The words carried more truth than he realized, encompassing both veterinary challenges and the marital crisis he remained unaware I'd discovered. We spent the rest of the evening in companionable silence, watching television while each absorbed in our own thoughts. The normalcy of the scene, two married people sharing quiet time after a busy day, felt like an elaborate performance. I was playing the role of trusting wife while secretly planning my investigation strategy. He was presumably playing the role of faithful husband while managing his secret relationship. As we prepared for bed, I found myself studying David's nighttime routine with new attention. The way he checked his phone one final time before plugging it into the charger, angling the screen away from my view. The slight smile that crossed his face as he read what was presumably a goodnight text from Nicole. The careful way he positioned the phone face down on his nightstand, ensuring I couldn't see incoming notifications. These small behavioral details, previously dismissed as normal digital habits, now felt like evidence of calculated deception. How many goodnight messages had he exchanged with his girlfriend while lying beside me? How many intimate conversations had occurred mere feet from our marital bed? "I might need to travel for work next week," David mentioned casually as he changed into pajamas. "The Houston client wants to meet in person to discuss the project parameters." The announcement was delivered with practiced nonchalance, but my newly suspicious mindset immediately questioned its authenticity. "How long would you be gone?" I asked, trying to sound like a wife concerned about scheduling rather than someone gathering intelligence about potential deception. "I'll need to arrange coverage at the clinic if you can't help with school pickups." "Probably just overnight, maybe 2 days at most," he replied, avoiding direct eye contact while folding his work clothes. Still working out the details with the client. The vague timeline and lack of specific information felt characteristic of his recent communication style, providing enough detail to sound legitimate without offering anything verifiable. As we settled into bed, David's goodnight kiss felt like a betrayal in itself. The brief contact, perfunctory and passionless, represented the physical intimacy of our marriage while he was simultaneously engaged in an affair. The disconnect between his public role as my husband and his private relationship with Nicole created a cognitive dissonance that made sleep feel impossible. I lay awake listening to David's breathing gradually slow into sleep patterns, his unconscious presence beside me feeling both familiar and foreign. This was the same man who'd held me through difficult pregnancies, celebrated our children's milestones, shared dreams about our family's future. Yet he was also someone capable of systematically deceiving me while maintaining an elaborate double life. The contrast between his sleeping innocence and the calculated nature of his deception created an almost surreal atmosphere. How many nights? Had he fallen asleep beside me after spending time with Nicole? How many morning kisses had followed evenings spent planning secret rendezvous? The violation felt more intimate than physical infidelity, representing a contamination of our most personal and vulnerable moments. Tomorrow would require careful planning. I needed to develop a systematic approach to gathering information about David's affair without alerting him to my investigation. The truth-seeking phase of this crisis had only just begun, but already I could feel myself changing from the trusting wife who'd accepted his explanations without question to someone capable of strategic deception in service of discovering reality. Part 4. Scope of Deception. Revealed. My phone alarm buzzed at 5:30 the next morning, an hour earlier than usual. I'd barely slept, my mind cycling through investigative strategies and worst-case scenarios. But the early wake-up call was intentional. David typically left for work by 7:15, and I needed uninterrupted time to examine his digital footprints before starting my own day. He remained deeply asleep beside me, his breathing steady and undisturbed. The sight of him lying peacefully, his face relaxed in unconscious innocence, created an almost surreal contrast to the systematic deception I was beginning to uncover. How could someone maintain such elaborate lies while appearing so genuinely at ease? The dichotomy was both fascinating and deeply disturbing. I slipped quietly from bed and padded to the kitchen, where David's laptop sat closed on the counter, next to his work bag. He typically prepared for morning meetings by reviewing emails and checking his calendar while drinking coffee, a routine so established that the laptop's presence felt like an invitation to investigate. The device wasn't password protected for startup, though individual applications might require separate authentication. David had always been casual about household digital security, operating under the assumption that family members had no reason to access his professional materials. His trust in my lack of curiosity about his work life was about to prove catastrophically misplaced. His email application opened automatically, revealing an inbox that initially appeared boringly professional. Client communications, internal, company messages, vendor notifications, the typical digital detritus of a marketing executive's daily responsibilities. But a more careful examination revealed subtle patterns that suggested hidden activities. Several email threads showed gaps in communication, missing responses that should have existed if the conversations had proceeded naturally. A client meeting scheduled for last Saturday morning, the same day David claimed to be working late, had apparently been canceled without notification to me. The cancellation email, sent Wednesday of the previous week, gave him ample time to make alternative plans while maintaining his work-related excuse. More concerning were the frequent communications with a business contact named N. Brady Consulting regarding social media strategy and influencer partnerships. The email address matched Nicole's TikTok profile information, confirming that David's relationship with her had professional components alongside the personal affair. How long had he been mixing business obligations with romantic involvement? The email threads with Nicole's consulting company painted a picture of an increasingly intimate business relationship that had clearly evolved beyond professional boundaries. Early messages from 6 months ago maintained formal business language and focused on marketing strategies for David's company. But recent communications showed a gradual shift toward more personal topics and casual scheduling discussions that seemed to involve non-business activities. One email from 3 weeks ago particularly caught my attention. Nicole had sent David a detailed proposal for social media consulting services, but embedded within the professional language were references to our weekend planning session and the location research we discussed privately. The mixing of business and personal elements suggested their affair had evolved from a professional relationship, making it potentially more complex than a simple romantic betrayal. David's calendar application revealed even more disturbing patterns. Multiple business meetings and client appointments that I remembered him mentioning had been moved, canceled, or marked as tentative without any explanation to me. The freed time blocks often corresponded with weekend activities or evening hours when he'd claimed to be working late. But most shocking was a recurring appointment every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon labeled simply Strategy Session, External, a venue. The meetings had been ongoing for 4 months, always scheduled during hours when I was at work and the children were in school. The euphemistic language suggested something requiring discretion, and the timing ensured family members wouldn't accidentally discover the appointments. A quick cross-reference with my own schedule confirmed what I suspected. These strategy sessions aligned perfectly with my longest shifts at the animal hospital, when I often worked through lunch and returned home after David's usual arrival time. He'd been systematically using my work schedule to cover his affair, activities, ensuring minimal risk of discovery by family members. The financial implications became clearer as I examined his expense tracking and banking applications. Regular charges to restaurants I didn't recognize, hotels in Austin despite our family living in the city, payments to vendors associated with luxury experiences like spa services and high-end shopping. The spending pattern suggested someone maintaining a relationship that required significant financial investment. Most disturbingly, many of these expenses were categorized as business costs or client entertainment, potentially making them tax-deductible and hiding their true nature from both family budget discussions and official financial records. David hadn't just been conducting an affair. He'd been creating systematic documentation that obscured the relationship's financial impact. I photographed the most relevant email threads and calendar entries with my phone, building an evidence file that was becoming more comprehensive than I'd anticipated. Each new discovery revealed additional layers of deception and planning that painted a picture of betrayal far more extensive than a simple romantic affair. David's movement in the bedroom interrupted my investigation. I quickly closed his laptop and moved to the coffee maker, beginning the morning routine with practiced efficiency. By the time he appeared in the kitchen, showered and dressed for work, I was calmly preparing breakfast while mentally processing the scope of what I'd discovered. "You're up early today," he observed, accepting the coffee mug I handed him with a grateful smile. "Everything okay?" His concern seemed genuine, which made his systematic deception even more unsettling. How could someone express such authentic care while maintaining such elaborate lies? "Couldn't sleep well, so I figured I'd get a head start on the day," I replied truthfully. The insomnia was real, even if its cause remained hidden from him. Thought I might go in early to help Dr. Santos with some administrative tasks. The explanation provided cover for any unusual behavior he might notice while keeping my actual activities private. David nodded sympathetically while reviewing his phone messages, probably checking for overnight communications from Nicole. "I'll definitely be late tonight. That client presentation got moved to today, and they want to do dinner afterward to, discuss next steps," he continued, not looking up from his phone screen. The casual delivery of another lie, so smooth and practiced, made my stomach clench with a mixture of anger and nausea. "Which restaurant?" I asked, keeping my tone conversational while testing whether he'd provide verifiable details. "Maybe I'll know if the food's any good?" The question seemed innocent enough, the kind of spousal interest that might help him avoid a disappointing business meal. David paused fractionally before answering, a micro-hesitation that I wouldn't have noticed before becoming hyper-aware of his deception patterns. "They haven't decided yet. Probably somewhere downtown. You know how clients like those trendy places with valet parking." His response was vague enough to sound plausible while providing no specific information I could verify. The children's morning routine unfolded with its usual controlled chaos. Jake searching for his science project materials while Emma negotiated for extra phone time during lunch. Their innocent involvement in family activities created a protective bubble around my heart, reminding me that whatever happened between David and me, these children deserved stability and security. Emma's perceptive gaze caught mine across the breakfast table, her expression carrying the concerned maturity that had been developing over recent months. "Mom, you still look really tired. Are you sure you're feeling okay?" Her question demonstrated the emotional intelligence that made her simultaneously wonderful and worrying as a 14-year-old. "Just having trouble sleeping lately," I admitted, which was completely true even if the underlying causes remained hidden. Sometimes adults go through periods where their minds won't quiet down at night. The explanation offered honesty without burdening her with inappropriate details about adult problems. David glanced up from his phone, his attention suddenly focused on our conversation. "Maybe you should see Dr. Rodriguez about getting something to help you sleep," he suggested with apparent concern. "Chronic insomnia can really affect your health and work performance." His recommendation seemed caring and practical, the response of a thoughtful husband worried about his wife's well-being. But I found myself wondering about his motivations. Was he genuinely concerned about my health, or was he hoping that sleep medication might make me less observant of his activities? The paranoid thought felt foreign to my usually trusting nature, but David's systematic deception was forcing me to question every interaction for hidden meanings. The school drop-off routine provided temporary refuge from the intensity of maintaining normal family interactions while processing such devastating discoveries. Jake's elementary school buzzed with its typical morning energy, parents coordinating, carpools and teachers managing the controlled chaos of hundreds of children beginning their day. Watching other families navigate their morning routines, I found myself analyzing their interactions with new cynicism. Which of these apparently stable marriages might be hiding similar deceptions? How many of these women were living with carefully constructed lies while believing they understood their family's reality? The questions felt invasive and paranoid, but Nicole's TikTok had fundamentally altered my perception of relationship security. Emma's high school presented a different atmosphere, teenagers managing their own complex social dynamics, while parents maintained more distant supervision. As I watched her join her friend group near the main entrance, I felt a surge of protective determination. Whatever happened between David and me, Emma and Jake deserved to maintain their sense of security and normalcy as much as possible. The drive to Sunshine Animal Hospital usually helped center my thoughts, but today the familiar route felt like navigating through emotional quicksand. Every song on the radio seemed designed to comment on my situation. Every advertisement for happy families felt like mockery. I turned off the music and drove in silence, trying to organize the morning's discoveries into some kind of coherent understanding. Dr. Santos was already at the clinic when I arrived, her early presence clearly intentional rather than coincidental. Her warm expression carried the kind of maternal concern that had made her legendary among both staff and clients. But today, her attention felt particularly focused on my emotional state. "How are you holding up, Sarah?" she asked gently as we entered the building together. "Yesterday was a lot to process, and you look like you didn't sleep much last night." Her observation was accurate and delivered with the kind of professional compassion that made her an exceptional veterinarian and manager. "I've been doing some investigating," I admitted, grateful for her non-judgmental presence. "And it's worse than I initially thought. Much worse." The words emerged more easily than expected, perhaps because Dr. Santos occupied a unique space in my life where professional and personal support intersected naturally. She nodded with the understanding of someone who'd witnessed countless personal crises among her staff over the years. "Do you want to talk about it?" Sometimes articulating what we've discovered helps us process the implications and plan next steps. Her invitation carried no pressure, creating space for me to share as much or as little as felt comfortable. The morning's first appointments provided blessed distraction from my personal turmoil, while I mentally organized the evidence I'd gathered. A nervous German shepherd requiring vaccinations, an elderly Persian cat with kidney issues, a young rabbit whose owner needed education about proper nutrition. The straightforward nature of veterinary problems, with clear diagnoses and treatment plans, offered refuge from the emotional complexity of my marriage crisis. But even routine procedures carried unwelcome reminders of my situation. A middle-aged couple discussing treatment options for their aging golden retriever displayed the kind of unified concern and shared decision-making that highlighted the emotional partnership I'd thought I had with David. Their easy communication and mutual support created a painful contrast to the systematic deception that had apparently characterized my marriage for months. During the mid-morning break, I found myself back in the staff room, staring at my phone with the same morbid fascination that had consumed me yesterday. Nicole Brady's TikTok profile had become an unhealthy obsession, each video offering additional clues about her relationship with David while simultaneously torturing me with evidence of their intimacy. A new video, posted just 3 hours ago, showed her morning routine in what was clearly the same upscale apartment I'd noticed before. But this time, details in the background revealed information that made my blood run cold. A men's dress shirt hanging on the bedroom door, the same distinctive blue pattern I'd helped David select for his birthday 2 months ago. A coffee maker that matched the expensive model we'd received as a wedding gift. Supposedly too complicated for our busy household, but apparently perfect for Nicole's leisurely lifestyle. Most devastating was a brief glimpse of a family photo partially visible on her kitchen counter. The image was too distant and blurry to make out specific faces, but the frame was unmistakably the silver one that had held our Christmas portrait from last year, the picture that had disappeared from David's office along with Jake's handmade coffee mug. The violation of seeing our family's image in another woman's space felt more intimate and painful than any evidence of physical infidelity. This wasn't just an affair conducted in anonymous hotel rooms or restaurants. David was systematically moving pieces of our shared life into his relationship with Nicole, contaminating our most personal memories and belongings. I screenshot the video with trembling hands, adding it to my growing collection of evidence. The documentation felt necessary even though I still hadn't decided what to do with the information. Some part of me, perhaps the veterinary technician trained in meticulous record-keeping, insisted on preserving proof of each new discovery. Tom Phillips appeared in the doorway, his timing suggesting he'd been monitoring my emotional state with the same concern Dr. Santos had shown. At 38, Tom possessed the steady competence and gentle insight that came from his own experience navigating divorce and its aftermath. "You look like someone who's discovered something she didn't want to know," he observed, settling into the chair across from me with his typical direct but compassionate approach. "Want to talk about it, or do you need space to process?" His question offered support without demanding details, respecting my privacy while making help available. This time, the words came pouring out before I could stop them. The TikTok discovery, the email evidence, the systematic nature of David's deception, the financial implications, the contamination of our family belongings. Tom listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious as the full scope of the betrayal became clear. "Sarah, this isn't just an affair," he said finally, his voice carrying the gravity of someone who understood the implications. "This level of planning and deception suggests something much more calculated. Your husband isn't just cheating, he's essentially living a double life with significant financial and emotional investment in both relationships." His professional assessment confirmed what I'd been afraid to fully acknowledge. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a brief emotional affair that might be forgiven and overcome. David had been systematically constructing an alternative life while maintaining the fiction of our marriage, a level of deception that suggested fundamental dishonesty about his character and intentions. "What would you do?" I asked, genuinely seeking guidance from someone who'd navigated similar betrayal. "How do you even begin to address something this extensive?" The questions felt overwhelming, encompassing legal, financial, emotional, and practical considerations that seemed impossible to manage simultaneously. Tom considered his response carefully, drawing on his own experience while recognizing that every situation carried unique complications. First, document everything. Every piece of evidence, every inconsistency, every financial discrepancy. You're going to need comprehensive records if this leads to legal proceedings. His advice was practical and immediate, focusing on concrete steps I could take while processing the emotional implications. Second, protect yourself financially. Make sure you understand your family's complete financial picture before David realizes you've discovered his deception. People engaged in this level of systematic lying often have hidden assets or debts that only become apparent during formal investigations. The warning about potential financial complications added another layer of anxiety to an already overwhelming situation. Most importantly, Tom continued, his voice gentle but firm, remember that none of this is your fault. People capable of maintaining such elaborate deceptions are skilled manipulators. The fact that you trusted your husband isn't a character flaw. It's evidence that you entered marriage with honest intentions. His reassurance helped counter the self-blame that had been building alongside my anger and betrayal. I'd been questioning my own judgment, wondering how I could have been so blind to David's deception. But Tom's perspective reframed my trust as normal rather than naive, shifting responsibility back to the person who'd actually committed the betrayal. The lunch break found me in my car, parked in the clinic's back lot, making phone calls that felt both necessary and terrifying. The first was to our bank, where I requested complete statements for all accounts associated with our family finances. The customer service representative was helpful but professional, explaining that I could access records for joint accounts immediately, but would need David's authorization for his individual accounts. The second call was to a family law attorney whose name Tom had provided from his own divorce experience. Margaret Chen, no relation to my colleague Diana despite the shared surname, had a reputation for handling complex cases involving financial deception and hidden assets. Her secretary scheduled a consultation for the following afternoon, contingent on my ability to bring comprehensive financial documentation. The third call was the most difficult, reaching out to my sister Jessica for emotional support and practical advice. Jess had always been my closest confidant, but our relationship had become more distant during my marriage, as David gradually discouraged deep friendships that might interfere with our family time. Reconnecting felt both necessary and awkward after months of limited contact. "Sarah, what a nice surprise," Jess answered on the second ring, her voice carrying the warmth that had always characterized our relationship. "I was just thinking about you yesterday. How are things going with the family?" Her genuine enthusiasm made me realize how much I'd missed our regular conversations. "Actually, I'm calling because I need to talk to someone about a serious problem," I admitted, the words feeling strange after so many months of maintaining the fiction that everything in my marriage was perfectly fine. "David's been having an affair, and it's much more complicated than I initially thought." The silence that followed was brief but profound, Jess processing the implications of what I'd just revealed. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. How did you find out? And what do you mean about it being complicated?" Her questions were gentle but direct, seeking information without judgment. I explained the TikTok discovery, the evidence I'd been gathering, the systematic nature of David's deception. Jess listened without interruption, occasionally making sounds of sympathy or anger as the full scope of the betrayal became clear. Her emotional responses felt validating, confirming that my shock and hurt were appropriate reactions to genuinely devastating circumstances. "This is horrible, Sarah, but I have to ask something that might be difficult to hear," Jess said when I'd finished explaining. "Looking back, were there signs you might have missed? I'm not asking to blame you, but understanding the pattern might help you protect yourself going forward." Her question prompted a mental review of the past year, searching for clues I'd dismissed or rationalized away. David's increased attention to his appearance, the mysterious schedule changes, the gradual emotional distance that I'd attributed to work stress. The signs had been present but subtle, expertly managed by someone skilled at maintaining multiple narratives simultaneously. I think I convinced myself that marriage naturally involved periods of distance and reconnection, I admitted. David was so good at providing reasonable explanations for everything that questioning him felt like being paranoid or controlling. The realization was painful, but important, highlighting how skilled manipulators could exploit trust and gaslight their victims into doubting their own perceptions. That's exactly how emotional abuse works, Jess replied, her voice carrying the professional authority of her nursing background combined with sisterly concern. The person creates just enough doubt that you start questioning your own judgment instead of trusting your instincts. It's not your fault for believing someone you loved and trusted. The remainder of our conversation focused on practical next steps and emotional support strategies. Jess offered to help with childcare if I needed time for legal meetings or investigations, and she promised to research local support groups for people dealing with marital betrayal. Her immediate availability and practical assistance reminded me what authentic family support looked like, contrasting sharply with David's conditional and manipulative version of love. The afternoon's appointments passed in a blur of automatic responses and mechanical competence. I performed my job effectively, but felt disconnected from everything around me, as if watching my professional life unfold from a distance. The weight of maintaining normal interactions while processing such enormous personal revelations created an exhausting cognitive dissonance. When 3 o'clock arrived, signaling time for school pickup, I felt completely unprepared to resume my maternal role. How could I look at Emma and Jake knowing their father was systematically betraying our family? How could I continue pretending everything was normal when their handmade gifts were decorating his mistress's apartment? Jake's elementary school pickup line moved with its usual efficiency, giving me time to compose my expression into something resembling maternal normalcy. Through the windshield, I watched other parents managing their routine concerns about homework and activities, their ordinary interactions highlighting how isolated I'd become in less than 48 hours. Jake emerged from the building with characteristic enthusiasm, his backpack bouncing as he ran toward the car. His innocent excitement about his day, his eager chatter about playground adventures and classroom achievements, created a protective barrier around my heart. Whatever complicated adult decisions lay ahead, this child's happiness and security remained my absolute priority. "Mom, guess what happened at recess?" he announced while buckling his seatbelt. "Tommy Chen said his mom wants to invite our whole family over for dinner this weekend. Can we go? His mom makes really good tacos." His enthusiasm was infectious, temporarily lifting my spirits despite everything else. The invitation represented normal family social activities, the kind of community connections that made neighborhoods feel supportive and stable. But accepting would require maintaining the fiction of our happy marriage, while potentially gathering more evidence of David's deception. The complexity of managing my investigation while protecting the children's social relationships felt overwhelming. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. I'll talk to your dad about our weekend schedule," I replied, the promise feeling both genuine and hollow. Would David even be available for family activities, or would he manufacture another work excuse to spend time with Nicole? Emma's pickup at the high school presented different challenges, her adolescent intuition immediately detecting changes in my emotional state despite my efforts to appear normal. Unlike her younger brother, she didn't chatter about her day, but instead studied my profile with quiet concern that was both touching and worrying. "Mom, something's really wrong, isn't it?" she asked, as we stopped at a red light near our neighborhood. Her direct question carried mature concern beyond her 14 years, demonstrating the emotional intelligence that made her simultaneously wonderful and concerning as a teenager navigating adult awareness. The temptation to confide in her was almost overwhelming. Emma's maturity and insight made her feel like a potential ally in processing this crisis. But she remained my child, deserving protection from adult problems that could destabilize her sense of security and trust in her family structure. Sometimes adults face challenging situations that require careful thinking and planning, I replied carefully, offering honesty without inappropriate details. But nothing that changes how much your dad and I love you and Jake. That's the most important thing for you to remember. The reassurance felt both true and false, encompassing genuine parental love while potentially misrepresenting the stability of our family structure. Her expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced by my diplomatic response, but she didn't push for more specific information. Instead, she reached across the center console and squeezed my hand, a gesture of support that nearly brought tears to my eyes. "You know I'm here if you need anything, right? I might be young, but I'm not stupid." The remainder of the drive passed in comfortable silence, Emma's quiet presence providing unexpected comfort. Her offer of support, delivered with teenage awkwardness but genuine care, reminded me that I wasn't entirely alone in this crisis. While I couldn't burden her with adult problems, her emotional intelligence and loyalty represented resources I hadn't fully appreciated before. Part 5. Power Shift and Agency Reclamation. The evening air in Cedar Park carried the distinctive scent of barbecue smoke and blooming mountain laurel as I stood in our driveway, staring at the house that had represented security and family stability for the past 8 years. The familiar sight of our 2-story colonial, with its carefully maintained garden and children's outdoor toys scattered across the lawn, looked exactly the same as always. But everything had fundamentally changed in ways that the physical structure couldn't reflect. David's car wasn't in the driveway yet, giving me approximately 30 minutes before he returned from what was undoubtedly another fabricated work obligation. The time felt both precious and terrifying, an opportunity to take concrete action while simultaneously acknowledging that whatever I did next would irreversibly alter our family's trajectory. Emma and Jake were settled at the kitchen table with their homework, the familiar sight of backpacks, textbooks, and pencil cases spread across the surface, providing a reassuring anchor of normalcy. Their absorbed concentration on math problems and reading assignments reminded me that whatever chaos was unfolding in the adult sphere of our household, these children deserved protection and stability above all else. I need to make some phone calls for work, I announced, keeping my tone casual while creating cover for the conversations I actually needed to have. "Can you two handle homework independently for about 20 minutes? The request was routine enough not to raise questions. While giving me privacy for activities that couldn't wait until after bedtime, Emma looked up from her algebra worksheet, her perceptive gaze studying my expression with the careful attention she'd been showing since yesterday. "Is everything okay, Mom? You've been making a lot of work calls lately." Her observation was accurate and delivered with mature concern rather than childish curiosity. "Just some administrative stuff that needs attention," I replied, which was technically true even if the administration involved my marriage rather than veterinary clinic operations. "Nothing that affects our family directly." The reassurance felt both honest and deceptive, encompassing the protection I was trying to provide while potentially misrepresenting the gravity of our situation. I retreated to the study that David had claimed as his private workspace, the room where I'd discovered missing family photos and keepsakes the day before. Sitting in his leather desk chair felt like claiming territory that had been designated as off-limits, a small but significant assertion of my right to access information about my own life and marriage. The first call was to Margaret Chen, the family law attorney whose consultation I'd scheduled for the following afternoon. Her office had provided intake forms that I'd completed during my lunch break, but additional questions had emerged as I processed the full scope of David's deception. "Mrs. Mitchell, I'm glad you called back." Margaret's voice was professional but warm, carrying the kind of competent authority that came from years of handling complex family law cases. I've reviewed the preliminary information you provided, and I wanted to discuss some strategies for protecting your interests before your husband becomes aware of your investigation. Her use of the word investigation made my activities feel official and justified rather than paranoid or intrusive. I was gathering evidence of systematic deception that could affect my family's financial security and my children's well-being. The reframing helped counter the guilt I'd been feeling about violating David's privacy. Based on what you've described, there are several immediate steps we should consider, Margaret continued. First, I recommend opening an individual bank account at a different institution from your current family accounts. This provides financial independence and protects emergency funds from potential manipulation or access restrictions. The suggestion felt both practical and frightening, representing a concrete acknowledgement that my marriage might be ending. Opening a separate bank account would be my first independent financial action in 8 years, symbolically and practically, asserting autonomy I'd surrendered when we consolidated our accounts after marriage. Second, I want you to gather comprehensive financial documentation before confronting your husband. Bank statements, credit card records, investment accounts, insurance policies, tax returns, anything that provides a complete picture of your family's financial situation. People engaged in long-term deception often have hidden assets or debts that only become apparent during formal discovery processes. Her warning about potential financial complications added another layer of anxiety to an already overwhelming situation. What other deceptions might David be maintaining? How much of our supposed financial security might be built on lies or hidden from my knowledge? Most importantly, Margaret concluded, document everything related to his affair and deception. Dates, locations, financial expenditures, communications, anything that establishes a pattern of dishonesty. Texas is a community property state, but evidence of marital misconduct can influence property division and support arrangements. After ending the call with Margaret, I felt simultaneously empowered and terrified. Taking concrete legal steps made the crisis feel more manageable while also acknowledging its severity. I was no longer just a victim processing betrayal. I was becoming an active participant in protecting my family's interests. The second call was to Austin Community Bank, a smaller institution where David and I had never conducted business. Opening an individual checking account could be accomplished online with minimal documentation, providing the financial independence Margaret had recommended without alerting David to my activities. The process was surprisingly straightforward, requiring only basic identification and an initial deposit that I could transfer from our joint account without raising suspicions. Within 15 minutes, I had my own bank account for the first time since our wedding, a small but symbolically enormous step toward reclaiming financial autonomy. The sound of David's car in the driveway interrupted my planning. His arrival, 45 minutes earlier than expected, creating panic about explaining my presence in his office. I quickly closed the laptop and moved to the kitchen, where Emma and Jake were finishing their homework with the focused determination that made parenting them genuinely rewarding despite everything else. "Dad's home early," Jake observed, glancing toward the front door with the excited anticipation that characterized his relationship with David. At 10, he still viewed his father as a heroic figure whose presence automatically improved any situation. The innocence of his enthusiasm created a protective barrier around my heart, while also highlighting what David's deception could potentially destroy. David entered through the front door with his usual evening routine, calling out greetings while hanging up his jacket and loosening his tie. But tonight, something in his demeanor seemed different. His movements carried a subtle tension, and his smile appeared forced rather than genuine. Had something happened with Nicole? Was he beginning to suspect my investigation? "How was everyone's day?" he asked while washing his hands at the kitchen sink, the question delivered with practiced paternal interest. His attention seemed focused on the children's responses rather than my presence, suggesting either genuine engagement with family life or skilled performance of fatherly concern. Emma launched into a detailed account of her history presentation, success while Jake described his recess adventures and upcoming science fair preparations. David listened with apparent attention, asking follow-up questions and offering encouragement that seemed authentic despite everything I now knew about his capacity for deception. "What about you, Sarah? How were things at the clinic today?" His question eventually turned to me, his expression carrying what appeared to be genuine interest mixed with something else I couldn't quite identify. Concern? Suspicion? Guilt about his secret activities? "Busy but productive," I replied, sticking to neutral responses that wouldn't invite deeper conversation. "Dr. Santos had me working on some challenging cases that required extra attention." The explanation was accurate enough to sound convincing, while avoiding any details that might reveal my actual activities. David nodded sympathetically, but I caught him glancing at his phone periodically throughout our conversation, presumably monitoring communications from Nicole. The divided attention that I'd previously attributed to work stress now felt like evidence of his dual loyalties and competing priorities. Dinner preparation proceeded with our usual collaborative efficiency, David helping with meal coordination while the children finished homework and set the table. The familiar domestic routine felt both comforting and surreal, a performance of family normalcy that masked the fundamental deception corrupting our household. But tonight, I found myself paying closer attention to David's behavior patterns. The way he positioned his phone face down, but within easy reach, ready to monitor incoming messages while appearing to focus on family activities. The subtle changes in his expression when notifications arrived, micro-reactions that suggested emotional investment in communications I wasn't privy to. "I might need to travel next week," David mentioned casually while serving Jake's plate, the announcement delivered. With practiced nonchalance, the Houston client wants to meet in person to finalize the project scope. The explanation sounded professionally reasonable while providing minimal verifiable details. "How long would you be gone?" I asked, trying to sound like a wife concerned. About family logistics, rather than someone gathering intelligence about potential deception. "I'll need to arrange my clinic schedule if you won't be available for school activities." "Probably just one night, maybe 2 at most," he replied, avoiding direct eye contact while cutting his chicken with unnecessary attention to detail. Still working out the specifics with their team. The vague timeline and lack of concrete information felt characteristic of his recent communication style. Emma looked up from her dinner with the sharp attention that had been characterizing her interactions lately. "Which hotel will you stay at? Maybe we could visit the pool if it's somewhere nice." Her innocent question demonstrated the kind of specific interest that David's lies weren't designed to handle. A fleeting expression of panic crossed his face before the professional mask returned. "They haven't booked accommodations yet. The client usually handles those arrangements for visiting consultants." His recovery was smooth, but not quite fast enough to hide the momentary discomfort that Emma's direct question had created. The interaction revealed something important about David's deception strategy. His lies were crafted to deflect general inquiry but couldn't withstand specific questions that required verifiable details. Understanding this weakness might prove useful if I needed to test his honesty about future activities. After dinner, while David helped Jake with a math worksheet and Emma retreated to her room for video calls with friends, I found myself alone with the dishes and my churning thoughts. The familiar task of cleaning up provided physical activity while my mind processed the day's discoveries and planned my next moves. The evidence I'd gathered painted a picture of betrayal far more extensive than a simple affair. David had been systematically constructing an alternative life while maintaining the fiction of our marriage, a level of deception that suggested fundamental dishonesty about his character and intentions. The financial implications alone could destabilize our family's security for years. But more disturbing was the contamination of our most personal spaces and memories. Our family photos in Nicole's apartment, Jake's handmade gifts in her kitchen, David's systematic removal of meaningful objects from our shared spaces. This wasn't just infidelity. It was an invasion that violated the sanctity of our children's innocent expressions of love. The sound of David's phone buzzing repeatedly in the living room interrupted my thoughts. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see him reading messages with the kind of focused attention that suggested personal rather than professional communications. His slight smile and relaxed posture indicated pleasant rather than stressful content, presumably correspondence with Nicole that was brightening his mood. The casual ease with which he maintained intimate communications with another woman while sitting in our family living room felt like a violation of our most basic domestic spaces. How many evenings had he spent exchanging romantic messages with Nicole while I cleaned up from dinner and helped children with homework? How many times had I fallen asleep alone while he conducted emotional intimacy with someone else mere feet away? "I'm going to step outside for a work call," David announced, rising from the couch with his phone in hand. "Client in California wants to discuss the project timeline before their morning meeting." The explanation sounded professionally plausible, while providing perfect cover for private conversation with his girlfriend. I watched through the kitchen window as he settled into one of our patio chairs, his body language immediately becoming more relaxed and animated than it had been during family dinner. Even from a distance, his demeanor suggested intimate conversation, rather than business discussion. The ease with which he shifted between devoted father and secret lover revealed a compartmentalization ability that was both impressive and deeply disturbing. 20 minutes later, David returned to the house with a noticeably improved mood, his smile more genuine, and his movements carrying less tension than they had earlier in the evening. The transformation suggested that his conversation with Nicole had been emotionally satisfying in ways that family time apparently wasn't. "Everything resolved?" I asked casually, testing whether he'd maintain consistency with his claimed work call. Sounded like a lengthy discussion for a simple timeline. Question. My observation was designed to seem like routine spousal interest while actually probing for inconsistencies in his cover story. "You know how clients can be," he replied with practiced exasperation. "They want to micromanage every detail even though they hired us specifically for our expertise." The response was vague enough to sound believable while avoiding any specific information I could verify or challenge. As we settled into our evening routine of preparing the children for bed and tidying the house, I found myself studying David's behavior with the analytical attention I typically reserved for complex veterinary cases. Every gesture, expression, and comment was potentially meaningful, revealing aspects of his character and motivations that I'd previously overlooked or misinterpreted. The bedtime routine proceeded normally. Jake's bath and story time followed, by Emma's negotiation for extended phone privileges. These parental responsibilities felt solid and authentic in ways that my marriage increasingly didn't, anchoring me to what remained genuine and valuable in our family structure. But even ordinary activities carried new significance in light of my discoveries. Reading Jake his favorite story about a family of bears learning to tell the truth felt like painful irony. Listening to Emma's concerns about friendship drama at school reminded me that honesty and trust were fundamental to all meaningful relationships, not just romantic ones. After both children were settled for sleep, David and I found ourselves alone in the living room with the television providing background noise for our separate thoughts. The familiar domestic scene felt charged with unspoken tension, at least from my perspective. David appeared relaxed, scrolling through his phone while half watching a nature documentary, seemingly unaware that his wife was conducting a comprehensive investigation into his fidelity. "I've been thinking about our anniversary coming up," I said suddenly, the words emerging before I could fully consider their implications. "Maybe we should plan something special this year. It's been a while since we focused on just us as a couple." The suggestion was both a test and a genuine expression of desperate hope that our marriage might somehow be salvageable. David's reaction was immediate and telling. A flicker of panic crossed his expression before he composed himself, but the momentary fear was unmistakable. Our anniversary would fall during a period when he'd probably already made commitments to Nicole, creating a scheduling conflict between his two relationships. "That sounds nice," he replied carefully, his tone lacking the enthusiasm that such a suggestion should have generated. "What did you have in mind?" The question seemed designed to gather information about my expectations rather than express genuine excitement about romantic planning. "Maybe a weekend getaway somewhere meaningful to us," I continued, watching his reaction carefully. "Like Hamilton Pool, where we used to go when we were dating. It's been years since we visited together." The specific location suggestion was deliberately provocative, testing whether he'd show any reaction to my mentioning the place where he'd recently created new memories with Nicole. The effect was immediate and dramatic. David's face went pale, his phone nearly slipping from his suddenly nerveless fingers. The suggestion of returning to Hamilton Pool with me had clearly triggered associations with his secret activities there with Nicole, creating exactly the kind of cognitive dissonance I'd been hoping to observe. Hamilton Pool might be too crowded this time of year, he managed after a long pause, his voice carefully controlled despite the obvious distress my suggestion had caused. "Maybe we should consider somewhere less popular, more private." His counter-suggestion revealed both his discomfort with my proposal and his desire to avoid locations that might trigger uncomfortable memories or associations. "You're probably right," I agreed, filing away his reaction as additional evidence of guilt and deception. "We can think of alternatives." The casual acceptance of his deflection felt strategic rather than disappointing, representing a successful test of his honesty rather than a failed attempt at romantic planning. The remainder of the evening passed in superficial normalcy, both of us absorbed in separate activities while maintaining the appearance of companionable marriage. But underneath the surface, fundamental dynamics had shifted. I was no longer the trusting wife, accepting explanations without question. I was an active investigator gathering evidence and testing theories about my husband's systematic betrayal. As we prepared for bed, David's nighttime routine carried additional significance in light of my new awareness. The careful way he positioned his phone face down on the nightstand, ensuring I couldn't see incoming notifications. The subtle smile that crossed his face while reading what were presumably goodnight messages from Nicole. The practiced ease with which he separated his emotional attention between his wife and his girlfriend. "I love you," he said as we settled under the covers, the words delivered with what appeared to be genuine affection. The declaration felt both precious and hollow, encompassing whatever authentic feelings he might still have for me while existing alongside his intimate relationship with another woman. "I love you too," I replied automatically, the response feeling more like a prayer than a statement. Some part of me still hoped that the man I'd married was salvageable underneath the layers of deception I was discovering, but a larger part was beginning to understand that reclaiming my agency and protecting my children might require acknowledging that the David I'd loved had perhaps never truly existed. The woman lying in bed beside her cheating husband was already fundamentally different from the trusting wife who'd fallen asleep there just 2 nights ago. She was gathering evidence, making plans, and preparing to take whatever action became necessary to protect her family's interests. The power dynamic in our marriage had shifted irrevocably, even if David didn't yet realize it. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities for investigation and evidence gathering. But tonight, for the first time since discovering Nicole's TikTok, I felt like an active participant in determining my family's future, rather than a passive victim of someone else's deception. The transformation felt both terrifying and empowering, marking the beginning of whatever came next. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.